Welcome to the May 30th edition of the PFF Forecast. This is a great one, okay? Because we heard, hey, you guys get negative all the time, be more positive. So a positive thing about every single NFL team plus a bet or two or three for that team. This is an awesome episode. We split them up. We go through it. We talk about Dak versus Allen versus Russ. We've got Eric's positive about the Steelers and the Vikings, which is absolutely incredible. And we've got recommendations, of course, because it is a Sunday podcast, a special Memorial Day weekend edition of recommendations coming at the end. So you will not want to miss any part of this episode. Let's rock. All righty, new office for you, big dog.
That's right. And this is where we'll be for June, right? I mean, you're going a few different places.
We'll be all over.
Cabo being one of them. I have a trip to Minnesota, a trip to Philadelphia. I'm excited. But yeah, I mean, we're going to be remote. We're not going to see. It was weird though. We didn't see each other from early March last year till late July. It's not going to be as big of a gap this year, but it'll be a gap.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Not a lot of difference between those places that you mentioned. All very similar. So that'll be fun. I wonder how many unique backdrops we'll get. I do think we'll do a good job. We'll probably bank a couple of episodes on middle of the week episodes like we've been doing. We'll be trying to bring in a guest to talk about a particular division on our Wednesday episode, and then our Sunday episode will be just you and I doing whatever we decide is most topical. I was also thinking we should definitely do our best to bring some betting conversation around the other sports going on. Because I was thinking about this. I've spent a lot more time betting on the NBA than I thought I would in the playoffs. I think it was 2 nights ago, and there were 3 teams that were down 2-0. The Celtics were like an 8-point underdog at home, down 2-0 to the Nets with Kyrie returning home.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's some fun stuff out there to bet on. So I think we may want to bring that into the conversation too.
Yeah. And this is a time, I don't know if everybody's like this, but if you're working on football or you're working on, your job and you have, stuff to work on at night, and it's just kind of nice to have those things on in the background. I've enjoyed some NBA, WNBA. I've even enjoyed some MLS, and the other thing is, we talked about this a little bit. We talk about futures on this podcast a lot. And I think, would you agree with me that futures in the NFL right now, especially now, a month into them being widely available, futures are just a nice place to steady, your conversation. I'm writing an article about the Steelers, and it's just a good place to show hey, we at PFF are not the only people down on Pittsburgh. Less so than it is a place to bet, right? Because especially if you're not betting with credit, you're tying your money up for a significant amount of time. And there's probably better ways to do that. We at PFF just published our best ball sort of, content. To me, best ball might even be the better way to sort of invest long-term in the NFL right now.
Really? So by the way, you mentioned the best ball draft kit, which you can get with the PFF Edge subscription, which, by the way, if you get for the whole year, you've got also all the redraft stuff and some bunch of gambling content, obviously. Talk to me though about that, because that is counterintuitive to me. Now, I don't play a lot of best ball. It's not my favorite thing in the world to do. But personally, the reason I would rather bet on a future is that it's very much tied to a thesis on one team or a closed set of teams. Whereas best ball, obviously, there's so much more variance because you're kind of, it's a league-wide situation in a lot of aspects.
I'll say this. I think the parimutualness of it, the playing against somebody else, and in the betting markets, you are if you bet on Atlanta 7.5 over, you're betting against a person who's going to eventually bet on the other side and move the number. These aren't like frictionless things. But what I like about best ball, and whether you play it on drafters or our guys at Underdog, like you're playing against other people. So in some ways, and the guys at Underdog, the players on there are really sharp and they give you great ADPs. So one of the reasons I like to play is you're playing against somebody. They do take a rake, but you're playing explicitly against other people. And B, it gives you sort of a consistent feedback loop about where the market is on players. So for example, like I'll get in there and Devontae Adams, like ADP continues to kind of shift around, right? And so you get an idea of like in real time what the marketplace is feeling about the Aaron Rodgers thing, right? Because I think he's explicitly tied to where they believe Rodgers is going. And the other thing is again, like it's also more inexpensive. Like I can do 100 best ball leagues at $3 a pop and have $300 worth of exposure. And to me, I probably have to put almost that much or more on a futures bet just to even make it feel like it makes any difference for me. So like, that's kind of where I'm at is I think it's like a fun new way of sort of exploring what people think. And the people that play on Underdog, like their ADPs are as sharp as anybody.
Yeah, that's a good point. Check out all the best ball content. It's great stuff. And it's a fun thing to do for the summer. It's really like low, like the barrier to entry is low, which is
it's amazing. And their interface is really nice. Draft, which was acquired by FanDuel, I thought was the best, was the best one, but they were acquired. And I thought, it was really weird last year. Who was going to take that place? I thought Underdog has done a really good job of stepping in there and giving everything we have.
Are you getting paid for this?
No, but I it's the play. Look, if
you want a recommendation, this is incredible. That's so you've really taken positivity to the next level. I'm getting there. We're going to go in alphabetical order. Every single NFL team, we have a positive statement / perspective / outlook for that team. And then we tried as best we could to come up with a bet. If you were looking to bet on this team in some way, how we would bet. Now, to be clear, we're not making these bets in every situation. Some of them we absolutely have and we've endorsed. But look, sometimes you come in with a particular desire or a gut feeling on certain teams. And if you're looking for a bet to make on a certain team, we're going to try and give you some to make. By the way, I'll just full disclosure here. I bet the Knicks live at plus 250 and they're now down 23. So the Knicks are dead to me. Never again. Just an absolutely disastrous.
I'm going to let you go with that. I'm going to let you keep talking about that.
So bad. You're starting. You were going with the Cardinals first. Mm-hmm. Give it to me.
Okay. The positive thing about the Cardinals is even though we look at I think we look at Cliff Kingsbury as being like a quote fake sharp, all this kind of thing. But they were a team in 2018 that was dead last. They lost almost a quarter of an expected point every time they played offense in 2018. And they were the 5th best team in EPA per play in weeks 1 through 9 using our model, 22nd in weeks 10 through 17. They did finish above average in EPA per play. So if we look at this thing from a global perspective, Cliff Kingsbury's absolutely improved the Arizona Cardinals. And I think that gets lost in the disappointment of what happened last season, right? They come from 2018 where they're worthy of the first pick. 2019, I think were 5-11. Last season, they're 500. Like this is a progression of 3 games per year, essentially. That is not to be scoffed at. Expectations are the opiate, I think, of fandom. And I think Arizona is being slept on a little bit. And as such, we have them as about plus 488 to win the West. I'll bet them at 6-1.
Jared scoffed. I love that bet. Like it a lot. I get the Atlanta Falcons. I was wondering who's going to get the Falcons. I get the Falcons. I'm very excited about it. So I thought this was really interesting. The Titans with Arthur Smith were the most efficient passing offense on first and second downs. Atlanta last year with Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley, and Matt Ryan was below average. They were 17th in the NFL. That is fantastic for them. You get a scheme that actually understands how to attack on early downs with play action. And they also don't have Derrick Henry, which should allow them to pass more on early downs. Matt Ryan, 6th highest raw PFF grade per snap in clean pockets in 2020. A lot of positive outlook for the offense, with or without Julio Jones. That's why I like the over. We've talked about that a bunch. And I also will pull this one in here. Plus 225 to make the playoffs. Our simulations have been making the playoffs 52% of the time. The NFC is bad. They are bad. Okay. I really like that to make the playoffs bet.
Yeah, I think I was even able to get it at 3-1 before the madness, before the markets moved towards Atlanta. We have seen them get a little cheaper over 7.5. I think it's in the 130.
And you may want to wait there and see if Julio gets traded, because we've talked about this before. That will certainly be overrated to a certain extent in the market, as great as Julio is.
Okay, let's talk about some wide receivers. I have the Ravens here. I really wrote, like, what is there not to like about the Ravens? However, this offseason, they really did address an issue they have. They drafted Rashad Bateman, Tylan Wallace to play wide receiver. Wallace, interestingly, a guy who a DFS college football darling last year, actually generated almost twice as many wins above average in college than Bateman did. Almost a full win over the course of that time. Very good football player. I think an extremely good value for them. So you look at that team now, their 4 wide receivers, Bateman, Brown, Wallace, Sammy Watkins. That's actually not that bad. Like, I feel like that's taken what was an unmitigated weakness for them and made it a strength. I like them. We have them about 10-1 to win the Super Bowl. You can get them at 14-1 on DraftKings. That's the bet I will endorse here. Ravens to win the Super Bowl at 14-1.
Yeah, I like that. Although they're just a year removed from taking a running back in the second round. So
look, we preach grace on this podcast.
That's the true. Graceful is definitely.
You let me talk about Underdog Fantasy for all the way up to the. I ran the light, as they call it.
Grace and sass. For anyone that didn't see, and I'm sure there were some of you that didn't, the best YouTube comment that we've received so far was on our last podcast with Ben Solak. By the way, if you didn't listen to that, it is a great podcast. We have to have Ben on more frequently. He was awesome. But the comment was like, I really liked Ben. I don't know why I listen to people that I don't like. And they were talking about you and I, and they called us the 2 sassiest straight men on the internet. And I, for one, am printing that out and hanging it as a banner. That is a compliment. I have the Buffalo Bills here. Here's the real positive for the Buffalo Bills. They're one of, in my opinion, like 4 or 5 teams that has a real shot to win the Super Bowl. Why? 3 main reasons. And I'm going to go almost in opposite order from least important to most important. They have an extremely deep wide receiving core that they've made even deeper with Emmanuel Sanders. As long as you don't ask Emmanuel Sanders to lay out for a really important pass in the Super Bowl, he's going to be a huge value add. They also have a coaching staff that gets it from a decision-making standpoint, massively important. And then they have a quarterback who is capable of playing throw for throw with Patrick Mahomes. He has not done it yet, but he is capable of doing it. Josh Allen, 3rd highest grade from a clean pocket last season. And that was like a jump of like 27 spots. So a lot of things to like for the Buffalo Bills. Here's my bet that I would make. They're plus 625 to make the Super Bowl. Break even about 13.8%. We have that at about 15%. That's the bet I'm making. I'm excited to talk a little bit more about the Josh Allen, Dak Prescott stuff, but I'm going to save that for the Cowboys, and you have the Cowboys later on.
Yeah. If you're going to beat the Chiefs, you either have to catch Mahomes on a bad day or go throw for throw with Mahomes. And I think there's only a handful of quarterbacks, maybe even fewer, that can actually do that. And I think on a good day, Josh Allen.
A JPP handful.
Right. Okay. So I have Carolina, not very high in Carolina. We saw that video where they were somehow like, I don't know, that video where they turned down the Vikings trade was really interesting.
Can you spell out that trade again for anyone that hasn't seen it?
Well, what was it? Like it was like a 1st and a 3rd, right?
It was 14, right? A future 1st and a future 3rd for 8.
Yeah, and they had the Jimmy Johnson chart said it was negative, so then they said get out of here. And whereas with most analytical charts, it would have been positive. Again, all of that's fine, but then you take a cornerback, a position where Actually, I tweeted this. I don't know if I tweeted this out, but I certainly mentioned it in one of our chats. Cornerback has been the position among positions with a decent number of first-round picks that has generated the most fifth-year option pickups. So like corners in round one, we think about like Okudah being a disaster last year, but it's actually a fairly safe position, but it's not getting Carolina where they need to be. And that's an issue. That being said, Joe Brady was one of the league's best play callers last year. If you look at success rate above what you would expect with the players on your team, he was first. If it was EPA, he was behind Andy Reid and Shane Steichen, which I feel like makes sense when Bridgewater's your quarterback. Like, I feel like you can generate more successful plays than like big plays. But he was good at both, despite the limitations last year. Right now, this again, my bet for the NFC South has always been Atlanta. But right now, Carolina 7.5 is plus 110 to the over. That's slightly plus EV in my opinion. And that's again because the tail risk with Atlanta is always there. And the New Orleans Saints might suck. And so you get 4 games right there. You also get Darnold with Joe Brady. I don't think Darnold's going to work out there, but there's always a chance that you can ooze. Like Darnold's Jets had 7 wins in 2019. So like that's certainly possible with that extra game there.
I have the Chicago Bears. I was excited.
No comment on the Panthers.
We're trying to move efficiently here, right? We need to average about a minute, slightly over a minute per team. And we were told another piece of feedback that we got that we're trying to leverage is really, sticking to the script here, sticking to the schedule. So Chicago Bears, they stole Justin Fields in the NFL draft. I don't care what the Georgia coaching staff says about him and how he's, got terrible work ethic and all this crap. I do not give a crap about the Georgia coaching staff and Kirby Smart. I just don't. You got the most accurate quarterback in the draft who also runs a 4.4 at pick 11. You take your chances, and that's a fantastic chance. It's a franchise-saving move. It's all potentially, and it's also a put you in the conversation for relevance move. And what I mean by that is you could actually be in the conversation to win a Super Bowl in the next 3 years, which was nowhere near where the Bears were. The franchise tag of Allen Robinson all of a sudden is something that he's not going to be as mad about because he's got a real quarterback here. You have a deep defense. They have obviously Khalil Mack. This was an incredible move by them. The Bears, in my opinion, a 180 from where they were before the draft, after the draft. So I like over 7.5 at plus 103. We have them going over 59% of the time. So that's a great bet. And then I really like this one. Matt Nagy. This is in part because you have brought me on board with Matt Nagy a little bit. 30-1 coach of the year. You know why? Let me talk to you about the narrative here. If they make the playoffs and Justin Fields is really good, Matt Nagy is going to get a lot of praise for being one of the decision makers, for bringing in Justin Fields, someone that the rest of the league was lower on, and turning him into a great quarterback. A lot of good things about the Bears.
Love it. People also go back to Nagy's Chiefs years and wonder, was he a reason for that nonsense? Yeah, I mean, the narratives are all there. Okay, our hometown Cincinnati Bengals. This one's actually pretty easy. Joe Burrow throwing to Jamar Chase in 2019 was 85 of 125. Sounds like me in flag football, frankly, for 1,783 yards, 20 touchdowns. It's ridiculous. And we did the numbers here. Tyler Boyd has the most yards from the slot since 2017 in the NFL. Couple that with T. Higgins just broke our boss Chris Collinsworth record for receptions by a rookie in Cincinnati Bengals history. AJ Green didn't even break that record, by the way. You got 3 receivers there. There's some good secondaries in the AFC North, but the Bengals should be able to compete with these 3 guys on the outside. I'm going to take over 6.5 plus 118. We have them at 7.7 wins. 7.8 wins, I think, was right around where the Steelers are. I'm going to go with that bet, the over 6.5 for our Cincinnati Bengals.
I was a little bummed I didn't get the Bengals because my favorite coach of the year bet is Zach Taylor at 50-1. Even though you might not be bullish on him long term, that's ridiculous with how much talent they have like on that team. Bringing Joe Burrow back.
If that gets close, do we call it Sweat Taylor? Like if we're worried, like the award show. Like if we're waiting for them to say the name.
We've got recommendations coming at the end. Let's save the Sweat Taylor for then. I have the Cleveland Browns, and obviously this is another team with just so much positive things to say. I'm going to start with Andrew Berry, the biggest positive is he is legit and he's had success. And that is not easy to do. The process and success don't always align. You've seen this with Hinkie. You saw this with Sashi. Like, it can get you thrown out of town. Andrew Berry combines understanding society and how people work, like in real life, and how to make smart mathematical decisions. That doesn't happen all over the place. They can survive, and this is a real positive thing. They can survive and be a relevant franchise whether Baker is the answer or not. And they've positioned themselves to find out about Baker this year. If he is, they're a Super Bowl contender right now. But if he isn't, they are in a situation to move on from him and reload quickly. Baker, I'll say this, though. This is another positive thing. 8th in PFF grade last year without much of a receiving core. And in the playoffs, and I think this was really great, a 90.5 and an 80.3 grade. That's awesome, right? To see a guy show up in big moments. So a lot of positive things there. And for a short guy, he attacks the middle of the field. We're going to talk about some guys that don't. Here are the bets I like. Conference winner, plus 750. That's an 11.8 break-even percentage. We have them doing that about 14% of the time. And then here's a couple of other ones. Baker 33-1 to win MVP. Justin Herbert's 20-1. So I'll take Baker.
Yeah, I think some Browns fans would have been a little bit upset with you having left the door open, but then you sort of slammed it shut with a bunch of good Baker things. I agree with you 100%. They also did a great job. Backup quarterback Case Keenum, I think, is actually a guy that can. I think they're the most robust team in the NFL right now, which is weird to say given where they've come from. All right, I have Dallas. Dak Prescott was the third most valuable player in the NFL in 2019, despite not playing in any playoff games. He was second going into the playoffs. Mahomes came from behind. The notion that he can't win a close game is complete bullshit, and something that people will always sort of talk about. QB wins, they'll chide that. Look at any starter in the NFL that has, over a certain number. Like, QB wins actually does correlate with being a good quarterback if you increase the sample enough. And furthermore, this idea of not being clutch sort of dissipates over time. Not to say that that's how we should judge quarterbacks, but they do correlate for sure. Furthermore, the Cowboys have the 11th easiest schedule in the NFL. And I think from a narrative perspective, even easier given how they clump together. Give me Dak at 17-1 to win MVP.
I like that. We'll be right back to the positive views on teams, but a couple things to tell you about. The first is, we mentioned this at the beginning of the show. There's a lot of great content on PFF.com, including the 2021 Best Ball Draft Kit. Now, Eric, I didn't know if that was like, you mentioned that at the beginning. I was like, are you really just selling the Best Ball Draft Kit? And then I realized, no, there's no way. You just love Best Ball, and you have been that way for a couple of years now. So it's almost like we made the Best Ball Draft Kit for you.
For me.
Yeah. It's awesome. There's tiered rankings, projections, stacks to target, look at strength of schedule, favorable matchups, the whole thing. So if you're getting into Best Ball, go get this. You pay $40 for an entire year. You'll get obviously all premium content the whole way through. But it's a great way to get yourself ready and oriented for the upcoming season. The other thing to mention is Ian Hartit's Fantasy Football Podcast. So fantastic. He's starting to create some really great content to get you ready for all your drafts coming up. And he, of course, plays Best Ball as well. So go check that out wherever it is that you get your podcasts. The other thing, we've mentioned this a bunch throughout the episode. Simbull, Simbull. It's a stock market for sports teams. And Eric, there's nothing that you like more than stock markets with sports teams. Yeah. So really you've called out a couple. There's obviously you can go buy basketball and baseball teams and hockey and the whole thing as well. Go to Simbull, simbull.app/PFF. Use the promo code PFF. When you deposit $10, you're going to get a $40 PFF subscription. That's I don't even know how they got us to do this deal. It's a ridiculous deal. So go make it happen. But you've mentioned 3. So normally I ask you to bring up some teams that you're purchasing. You've already mentioned them throughout the podcast.
Yeah, man. Buy low on some of these teams because they'll win some games. You'll get some dividends.
Go check out, Ben Brown wrote a great article looking at how people have valued those teams in the stock in the symbol market. So go to pff.com and check that out as well. All right, back to positivity on the NFL. So here was what I was going to bring up. I was interested in the Dak, Josh Allen, Russ debate. We got started with that in our podcast with Ben Solak. I would go listen to that. He brought up some good points and got me thinking more about Dak. So I went and compared those three in a couple of areas that I thought were really useful. EPA per play from a clean pocket. This is the last 2 years because obviously Dak only played a handful of games. Dak is the best among those three. Then it goes Josh Allen and then Russell Wilson. Lowest sack rate. Dak is the best among those three. Then it goes Josh Allen. And then Russ is almost double both those guys.
Yeah.
Like the case for Dak Prescott being an elite quarterback is way better than I initially thought it was. So I love your bet.
Here's my take on Prescott versus Allen. I would, in the NFL playoff format, I'd rather play Dak. In a 7-game playoff, I'd rather play Allen.
You'd rather have?
I'd rather play against Josh Allen in a 7-game format, and I'd rather play against Dak in a 1. So I like Dak.
Are you purposely trying to confuse me as to which one you'd rather?
I think
have?
so, maybe. Okay, Dak is better in a 7-game series.
Yeah,
Allen is better in a 1-game elimination, I think.
I obviously love that. Here's what I'll say: Josh Allen's ceiling is higher. I have underestimated Dak Prescott's ceiling. And I think if the price were the same, I would be very close to taking Dak Prescott. I honestly don't know which one I would take right now. I need to do more. We can do a whole podcast on that. Yeah. I have the Denver Broncos. This might be one of the most positive things I can say about any team. They have, in my opinion, a top 3 roster ignoring quarterback. They could have one of the 5 best wide receiver duos in the NFL with Judy and Courtland Sutton. And then here's the positive thing on Drew Lock. Drew Lock had the 14th best PFF grade from a clean pocket last year on a per snap basis. Where was he terrible? He was terrible under pressure. Why? Because his average depth of target was the deepest in the NFL. He forced so much stuff. You look at Josh Allen, you go, how did he do it? He actually pulled his average depth of target back more than a yard. Drew Lock can do that. I'm not saying he's going to turn into Josh Allen, but he could turn into average. Whereas right now, I think the Denver Broncos have one of the 3 worst quarterback situations. The Texans exist in the NFL. But that's some positivity for Drew Lock. The bets I like. Look, we talked about their over earlier. That has obviously come way up with the potential Rodgers news, so that's not a value anymore. So here are actually 3 that I like that are player specific. And I don't love them. I'm going to go in order from least like to most like. Patrick Surtain, 14-1 to win Defense Rookie of the Year. Vic Fangio gets it. He is a brilliant defensive coordinator. Patrick Surtain, a smart guy. He's kind of a long shot. Javonte Williams was 33-1 to win Offensive Rookie of the Year. He's now 20-1. I still like Javonte Williams, most elusive guy in the entire draft, most missed tackles forced among all running backs. But this is my favorite one. Von Miller, 16-1 comeback player of the year. Because if this is a team that overachieves, it will be defense. And Bradley Chubb on the other side, teams will respect now after last year. Von Miller has some nice sack total. 16-1 is a great price.
Absolutely. And you have, I've been helping, I was getting athleticism scores for Timo, who is no doubt writing a brilliant article about how they help players progress. Von Miller was one of the best athletes we've ever seen at Edge, which makes sense. Interesting there with the Broncos for sure. Okay, I have the task of talking about the Detroit Lions. And look, this is what I'll say. Tanking is a sign of pragmatism. And Detroit appears to be tanking because from the eating of Jared Goff's contract to the drafting of Penei Sewell as a right tackle and the admission that they will not go for 2 when they're down 8, they are not trying to win in 2021. And that is fine. That is fine. If you're not first, you're last. And Detroit is already last. They might as well stay there and not try to be 20th. Okay. So that to me is the best I can say about Detroit. And they got some smart people working there. I actually do like the direction of that franchise. But for 2021, to me, this is the bet you make. You buy them on Symbol for $37.
Love that. I think that's fantastic. I have the Green Bay Packers, and this was the hardest one I think I had. Because, and you can go listen to the podcast we had with Aaron Nagler where he talks about that situation. He understands it very well. But this is the positive thing about them. In any given game, they can have the 4 best players in the world at the 4 most important positions. That's how good those players are. Quarterback, Aaron Rodgers; wide receiver, Devontae Williams; corner with Jair Alexander; and left tackle with David Bakhtiari. That is freaking awesome. And I'm going to expound a little bit on Davante Adams here. I think he's the most underappreciated superstar in the NFL. Even his own fans talk about their record when he doesn't play. This guy is the best creator of separation in the NFL. Josh Hermsmeyer wrote a great article about it. Davante Adams is underappreciated even for how good he is. I'll also say this. They might have one of the best cornerback safety duos with Jair and Adrian Amos in the NFL. Hard to find bets for them here, but they're 14-1 to win the Super Bowl. If they have Aaron Rodgers, we'll give them about a 14% chance. 6.7% chance is break even there at 14-1. I do think it's becoming increasingly likely that they find a way to get him to come back. So I like that 14-1.
Look, I have the unenviable task of going from Detroit to Houston and then following that with Jacksonville. So
it's incredible.
I have Houston. What do okay. I was looking at how well teams have spent their money, and Houston last year was actually top 10 in terms of WAR per dollar spent at quarterback and tight end. Now, they lost both guys. Daniel Fells went to the aforementioned Detroit Lions, or Darren Fells. Daniel Fells is older. And obviously Deshaun Watson. The most positive thing I can say about Houston is that they're cheap, and you can bet them. You can get them for $23 in Symbol.
By the way, Symbol, SIMBULL, it's basically a stock market for sports teams, and it's a lot of fun. I would go check it out. The Indianapolis Colts. So this was a tricky one for me, actually. And I think the most positive thing about the Indianapolis Colts is that if I needed to choose one coach to make a decision for me in a game, I actually think I would choose Frank Reich. Harbaugh is right there. They're basically tied. But I absolutely love Frank Reich. And here's what I'll say about the Colts. They have a top 5 pass blocking unit. The only situation where Carson Wentz has found the right side of variance is with a top 5 pass protection unit. That said, I think the bet I would make is actually under 10 wins. That would be the bet that we would, our simulation would have them doing. I think we have them going under their win total about 70% of the time. And that's tricky because I think the Titans regress a little bit. Carson Wentz is like 9-1 comeback player of the year. I do not like those odds, but that might have been the second bet that I would have made. This was a tricky one for me.
I thought we were only supposed to do positive bets for teams. It's kind of like
my point was positive in terms of what I would most expect to make money on.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So I said something positive. Look, if you want to do that, I'll say Carson Wentz 9-1 comeback player of the year.
Yeah, because I think Indy is one of the better run teams in football.
Agreed.
But I think that we've all incorporated that. That's baked into everything now.
Yes.
And the problem then is at the most important positions, they're weaker. Like last year, Rivers, I thought, played okay and actually very well at times, but they were not that great at wide receiver, so it really limited them in big games. And this year, they're weaker at quarterback than they were, and not any better at wide receiver. So to me, it's tough where I still think the players on the field sort of overcome even the functionality of that team, which is quite high, admittingly. Okay, Jacksonville, speaking of functionality. Okay. I'll say this. Jacksonville has drafted a number of highly regarded players the last 2 years in rounds 1 and 2. And talent sometimes comes together. They have the second easiest schedule in the league. This isn't the best of it anymore. You could have got it at 12-1 earlier in the offseason, but they're still plus 750 to win the South. I think it's more like plus 400. So grab yourself some Jacksonville. Houston's not winning this year. And if you're down on both Tennessee and Indy, I think Jacksonville's at least a nice little flyer for you to take.
Yeah, we talked about that earlier too. You got some stinkers. I did not. I got the Kansas City Chiefs. Well, there's a lot of positive things. We've actually talked a bunch about, I think, some of the negative future impacts of the moves they've made. I want to talk about the positive, like this year impacts of the moves they've made. And I think the biggest one is that Patrick Mahomes could throw 60 freaking touchdowns this year. Like, it would not surprise me at all. I was looking at some of the areas that Patrick Mahomes actually struggled last year. He had just a 98 passer rating on throws 20 plus yards downfield, which is ridiculous. He had just the 10th best PFF grade per snap from a clean pocket. These are all areas that I anticipate he is going to be a heck of a lot better next year. He's going to go scorched earth. 60 touchdowns to me is happening about a fifth of the time when Mahomes plays this entire season. And look, I'm not going to say that undefeated is an option here, but he's plus 450 to win MVP. So that's 20%. I think he's thrown 60 plus touchdowns at least 20% of the seasons that he's playing this year. So that's my bet for the Chiefs. They're like 5-1 to win the Super Bowl. I think that's a little bit. I would rather bet Mahomes MVP than Super Bowl because more things can go wrong, obviously. The Bucs are really good. So that's my bet for the Chiefs.
Yeah, it's actually remarkable that they managed to win all those games in the second half of the regular season without covering the spread once. And I think it just shows that like they were kind of living on the edge even going in to the playoffs in hindsight. Okay, I have finally a team that's actually thought of as being pretty decent. I have the LA Rams. Here's what I'll say. Moving on from Jared Goff was pragmatic and correct. The problem I have is their overall orientation as a team caused them to move on from Jared Goff in probably the least optimal way, which is to acquire a middle-in quarterback.
Hey, positivity.
And a humongous contract. To their credit, though, they have acquired good players over the course of the years. They had the fourth most wins above replacement on their roster in 2020. That's a positive. I think the market's way too heavy on them. However, the one bet I do like is Jalen Ramsey at 33-1 to win Defensive Player of the Year. I did put, I guess, because again, I think the Rams are thought of very positively on the marketplace right now, and I'm just a little bit beneath that.
That's very interesting in light of what I had for the Chargers, for the next team. So the positive thing here is that if you're picking a young coach to be brilliant for the long haul, I think Brandon Staley is right up there. I think he's up there with Shanahan in that regard. Now, he's on the defensive side of the ball, but if you're going to pick one guy who's defensive minded, you should pick a guy that's a former quarterback who coaches the defense to stop the pass first. And that's what Brandon Staley is. I still think his conversation with Richard and Chris on Chris's podcast a few months ago was one of the best that I've heard. He's so intelligent. Here's the other thing. I think he gets it with his players, and that is more and more increasingly an important thing as you're seeing throughout the league. Not getting it with the players you coach is going to have negative ramifications for your team. So that's one of the really great things about the Chargers. The other thing is Derwin James. Derwin James is 25-1 to win Defensive Player of the Year. That shocked me. However, Brandon Staley is going to put these guys in positions to succeed like you have not seen before in Los Angeles. I mean, not even close to it. They have been so talented and yet have not reached that. And that's why my other favorite bet is Asante Samuel, 25-1 Defensive Rookie of the Year. You saw what he did. I think you mentioned this with Darius Williams in Los Angeles with the Rams last year.
Nice. Okay, moving on to Vegas. Dreams. Okay, not a lot to like here, but they are currently undervalued, in my opinion, on the market. 7 wins flat, -115. I think 6.5 -150 was what Ben Brown and I bet on the PFF Daily Betting podcast. All of his warts understood. Derek Carr is a top 10 quarterback in the NFL in many years. And John Gruden, this is the paradox of John Gruden. Gruden is responsible for the groceries, and he's terrible at buying them. But he's a good cook. Like, it's weird, but he, you talk about his 6th best play call in the NFL last year in terms of EPA, 12th in terms of success rate. Like, I think John Gruden's misunderstood. That being said, they just don't shop well. So it's tough, but I think 7 wins, when you have a quarterback as good as Carr, as limited as Carr, but as good as Carr, I think 7-10 is sort of like is too low for expectations. They were an 8-8 team last year, and how much worse did they really get this offseason?
Mm-hmm. He's a man whose intentions are good. I'm not going to sing the song for you. This is another stat that I found unbelievable as I was doing research for this. Derek Carr had more big-time throws last year than Josh Allen. That absolutely floored me. I was stunned to see that. Big-time throws being
that Sunday night
throws
game
down the football field. Yeah, now a lot of them were against Kansas City.
That Sunday night game was the first time, and I've been a Chiefs fan for a decade, but that was the first time I was ever afraid of Derek Carr. Like, it was the first time I watched him play, and I'm like, this is sort of the weird thing about the Dak Josh Allen thing too.
That's interesting because I've been afraid of Derek Carr almost every time we bet the Raiders.
Sure. Okay. Go for it. Him fumbling out of the back of the end zone is certainly something to be worried about.
I will never forget that. I have the Miami Dolphins. Tons of positive stuff here. I don't think there's been a team that has done a better job of setting their young quarterback up for success this season relative to last season than the Dolphins. They played him last year. He did not perform anywhere near as well as Herbert and Burrow. And I think that's a good thing for this year. It is going to motivate him. And they have now put a new receiving core with Will Fuller and Jalen Waddle that is going to allow him to open up the middle of the field. I've talked about this before. Lowest graded quarterback on middle of the field throws last year. That is awful. That's a place where he dominated at Alabama. Jalen Waddle's speed, Will Fuller's speed, Devontae Parker now can fit that mold they want. And Gesicki is basically a slot receiver. So many positive things. I think Brian Flores is right there with Brandon Staley in terms of the only defensive coaches that I would consider hiring. My favorite bet is for them to make the playoffs at plus 130.
Yeah, it's crazy. I was going through the teams that have better odds to make the playoffs than the Steelers, and that was one that popped out to me as a number that's really good to bet. Okay, I have Minnesota.
We had to make this happen.
The Vikings are not a great team, but they do have some great players. They were top 10 in the NFL last year in WAR generated by the passing game, quarterback, wide receiver, tight end, O-line, per dollar spent. A lot of that is Justin Jefferson. Defense is terrible, but offense regresses more slowly than defense does. So if you can get career years-ish out of some of those guys, they could be okay. That being said, the market is way too high on them. They opened at 8.5, and I think it was like plus money to the over. It's down 9. And I got to say, folks, I bet under 9. But I do like, this is the thing. Kirk Cousins should not have 50-1 MVP odds. So I'm taking that for all the LOLs.
That, can you imagine? Oftentimes we talk about long shots. And like, yes, it can be plus EV, but can you imagine a world where Kirk Cousins wins MVP? Like, I just can't. I can't fathom that, that would be one of, I'm trying to think about, MVP players that have won MVP, really the ones that have come out of left field. Like, I feel like Matt Ryan kind of came out of left field.
Yeah, I almost said Matt Ryan, but the problem is Ryan led his team to the 1 seed twice before even winning the MVP. So, like, Kirk has never had team success. So, like, that, the Matt Ryan one, I guess, makes even more sense. But you're right. It has to be that sort of equivalent. It would be out of left field for sure for him to win it. But 50-1, he's at the same odds as Jalen Hurts, which is absurd.
That is absurd. I have the New England Patriots. I think Mac Jones at 15 was the best value pick in the NFL draft, at least in the first round. I also thought Christian Barmore in the second round was up there as well. And I think it will motivate the living hell out of Cam Newton. Cam Newton last year was a good runner and at times a good passer with one of the worst supporting casts in the NFL. Now, their wide receivers, I don't think have improved enough for me to feel that much better about it. But they've obviously improved a little bit. They've improved the tight ends dramatically. So from that perspective, I think that you've provided a ceiling there. That said, I do think my favorite bet is actually under 9 at plus 107. And I think the reason for that is that if Cam is not good enough to beat out Mac Jones and you put Mac Jones in there, Mac Jones had 10 times of a better receiving core last year at Alabama than he will have in New England with this receiving core. So, you might get a few lumps there. And I don't think that's bad. having a high draft pick next year for New England is not a bad thing. That's another positive thing to keep in mind. So my bet would be under 9 at plus 107. I think things are ultimately looking up for them, given that they've got Mac Jones at 15.
Yeah. Mac Jones also has looked the part, quote unquote, in camp. All right. This will be short for the Saints. I like Jameis a lot, but I think the positive thing about the Saints is their defense was good last year. They're 8th in EPA per play allowed. They didn't lose, I think, that important of people. I know Hendrickson and Jenkins are, good players, but there's not a lot to like here with the cap situation and the quarterback gone and no secondary targets. But Marshawn Lattimore, 50-1 to win Defensive Player of the Year, feels like the most positive bet I can make on the Saints.
The New York Football Giants. Pretty excited about this one. So investing in pass catchers this offseason is what we called for. They did it this year. And this is going to let you know whether Daniel Jones can be the guy or not. And to that end, Daniel Jones, 26th in PFF grade in 2019, 18th in PFF grade in 2020. The progression is there. It's all about not taking a bunch of sacks and having guys that will get open, that will allow him to get rid of the ball quickly at different levels of the field. I think is going to be fantastic. They're 4-1 to win the division. That's one of my favorite bets. I also, as we've talked about, we've written this one up, over 7 wins.
Yeah, that one, things got to come together here. All right, for the other New York team, we project Zach Wilson at about 1.8 WAR this year, using our college to pro model, which is more than Sam Darnold generated his entire Jets career.
Jesus.
Give me over 6.5 plus 112.
Oh, man.
For the New York Football Jets. Robert Salah, NFL players all around the roster for the first time in forever, and a good young quarterback. Give it to me.
The Philadelphia Eagles. The Philadelphia 76ers.
Oh, Scranton.
Yes. The Philadelphia 76ers trusted the process, and they are scraping the hell out of the opponents in the NBA playoffs, depending on when you listen to this. I'm not sure what will happen in the second round, but they took care of the Heat, and in very spectacular fashion. The Eagles are following that train of thought. They traded back, good process. They drafted a really great wide receiver in Devontae Smith, great process. That'll help them figure out whether Jalen Hurts has it or not. Great process. Not worried about winning games this year. Great process. Had one of the worst receiving corps in the NFL last season. It's going to be much improved this year. The process for the Philadelphia Eagles, I think, can be sound. It doesn't really matter. Nick Sirianni is not the guy you're winning a Super Bowl with ultimately, right? Think further down the road. So in light of that, I would bet at plus 127 under 6.5 because it's not about winning football games here. And I do think both the Cowboys and the Washington football team and the Giants are good teams in that division. It won't be nearly as bad as it was last year.
Okay, I have the Pittsburgh Steelers. Our team.
Got so lucky, man.
Yeah, stick up for the Steelers. No. Here's the thing. The Steelers got the most WAR per dollar out of any team at the wide receiver position last year, which shows sort of like, whether by hook or by crook, they were drafting the right positions for a while. And that kind of buoyed them, despite the fact that Roethlisberger did not play well a season ago. That being said, then they go and draft the running back and all that kind of stuff. I guess the only good bet I can think of for the Steelers is to buy them for $35.60 on Symbol, because I think a lot of other Steelers fans might end up doing that as well. And you can get a decent value there.
You've really gone to the Symbol well a couple times. I like that.
Well, there's really no I'm not. If I'm going to bet something positively for a team, I'm going to maybe do it long term.
The Seattle Seahawks. So there have been reports that Julio Jones is someone that they are looking at, and that is a huge positive that they might trade for Julio Jones. Now they just have to throw the ball like actually all season. But that would give them the most physically intimidating wide receiver duo in the NFL with DK Metcalf and Julio Jones. That is absolutely banana land. Russell Wilson, top 7 graded every single week for the first 7 weeks. Top 6 grade, both from a clean pocket and under pressure overall. The nice thing about Julio Jones is that, yes, he can dominate the middle of the field, but also outside the numbers, he's still phenomenal. And that is where Russell Wilson just absolutely eviscerates teams. So That would be incredible. They are a steal at 3-1 to win this division. Russell Wilson, he's still the best quarterback in the NFC West. 3-1 to win the division's great bet.
Speaking of the NFC West, I got the Niners. Here's the thing. I don't get this. Jimmy G has a career 8.2 yards per pass attempt. He's low-key one of the better bridges we've ever seen from, incumbent quarterback to rookie quarterback. The market thinks the Seahawks and the Cardinals are going to fall off. I think that they have a decent chance to win the West. And if they do, Trey Sermon at 25-1 is going to win Offensive Rookie of the Year.
All in. All in. I just hope Trey Lance gets some starts here. I need to see that. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers. A lot of positives here. But I think the biggest positive is they've built such a deep supporting cast around Tom Brady in two really important positions: pass coverage and pass receiving. They are as deep as any team out there. Tom Brady, after the bye last year, had a top 7 PFF grade every single week all the way through the Super Bowl, obviously. And if you just use those weeks, he'd be the highest graded quarterback and the MVP. He's 14-1 to win the MVP. He looks younger every single freaking year. That stretch after the bye week, he had a 10% big time throw rate. No one else over 7% or over 8%, I should say. That is an incredible bet. They also the NFC is not very good, especially if Rodgers goes. Like, Tom Brady could light the league on fire and win MVP at 14-1. And you'll get halfway through the year and you'll go, wait, he was 14-1 MVP, win MVP. That to me is an incredible value.
Yeah. The only thing that could tank them, I think, is him throwing interceptions at the rate he did at some points in the season, as well as the NFC title game. But you're right. I mean, they look pretty indestructible at this point. All right. If the Titans acquire Julio Jones, now I think this is a pipe dream because it's cap space and stuff, but they might. They have a top 10 offense in terms of EPA the last few years, and top 5 since Ryan Tannehill took over. That team, even though they lose offensive linemen, 2 weapons, I think they could still be okay. And if they do, they could have a lead enough where somebody like Caleb Farley, 25-1 to win Defensive Rookie of the Year, could get some interceptions against some of these younger quarterbacks in the division.
Man, AJ Brown and Julio would be so sick. The Washington Football Team, this is the last team here. They have the best roster in the division. Now, the question is, of course, at quarterback. But from Chase Young to Terry McLaurin, they really have playmakers at every single position out there, which is you cannot say about a lot of teams in the NFL. And a lot of them are young. So, if you're thinking about future franchise that you want to invest in, maybe on Symbol, for example, this would be one. If Fitz just plays decent, and if you look at his grade over the last 3 seasons, he was 10th, 14th, and 19th. He's been a top 20 graded player at the position over the last 3 seasons. They can beat any team because his ceiling is so high in terms of the throws he's willing to make. So they could easily beat the Dallas Cowboys in any game, in any situation, even if they have to come from behind. So plus 260 now to win the division. That would be the bet that I would make. I hope that they figure out the quarterback at some point here. Maybe Taylor Heineke gets a few starts. I think he's similar in that, look, we saw him play against Tampa Bay, and he made some nice throws downfield. Alex Smith, it was heroic that he came back. I think we're looking at that heroism as if he was a really good quarterback. He was not. It was just amazing that he was on the field. They had the worst quarterback situation in the NFL last year. That takes a dramatic turn back towards average. And I think with how good that roster is, they should be much shorter odds to win the division.
I think that wraps it up.
That was well done. We did that in under an hour.
Yeah.
That's impressive. So last thing here, we're going to do some recommendations for this week. You teased yours last week. So we kind of know that a book is coming our way. So this better be one hell of a book.
Yeah. For our mathematicians and data science fans, it's a book called Shape by Jordan Ellenberg. It talks about how geometry affects the way that we do sort of everything. I thought it was really good. Yeah, that was a good one.
Let me go check that. Does it come in audio?
I don't know. It's relatively new. I do know that it comes in, Kindle and all that, but not audio yet. I don't think.
Go check it out. I told you I was going to come prepared this week. Okay, I've got it all here. Okay, I'm setting you guys up. It's Memorial Day weekend. I am setting you all up for the summer here. Okay, so I've got 3 things for you. 3. I'm going to give you something to cook. I'm going to give you a couple of guidelines to work out so that you stay in shape even after you cook. And then I've got a product that I think people will help. It will help them enjoy the summer more. Okay, so here we go. First thing to cook. Really easy. You don't have to be a wizard to do this. Get yourself a New York Times cooking subscription. It's very cheap. The app is super easy. Something that I made on there that I would highly recommend is caramelized shallot pasta. Okay, it's simple. You can't mess it up, and if you serve it to someone, they'll think you're a chef. Go make it happen. The second thing is going to be around how I would structure workouts in the summer. Here's what I would do. Think about intensity over all else. If you work out for 30 minutes, but you go all out, that's going to be way, 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 way more impactful than like an hour-long jog. Don't do jogs. Those are a waste of your time. So intense workouts early in the morning, and then I recommend intermittent fasting. Go like an 8-hour block, 12 p.m. to 8 p.m. That'll make your life simple, and you'll get in good shape. Last recommendation I have. You're out there, you're partying it up. It's going to be warm, Eric. What happens when it's warm and you're moving around?
Well, not to me, but to the youngins that we've spent.
To some people, it causes you to smell like shit. Okay, don't smell like shit. So I've got something for you. I have to credit my beautiful girlfriend for turning me on to this. It's a cologne called Santal 33. It's kind of pricey. Okay, but this is, I think, my favorite cologne I've ever purchased. It's from a brand called Le Labo. You know this because we were at the restaurant where literally a waitress like turned around and was like, "Wait, are you wearing this? This cologne?" So I recommend it. Go check it out. I told you I was coming prepared for Memorial Day weekend.
Wow. Yeah. That shows like the contrast between the two. I say like a book, and you were like, "Look, this is how you stay fit."
I'm trying to set people up for the summer, so I wanted to give a little gift there. Now I'm going to maybe I'll bring a book next Sunday. You never know. We're going to mix it up. I've enjoyed this new segment though. So kudos to you on that. That was our show. We'll be back on Wednesday. Wednesday's going to be great. We're doing the NFC South, and we have another first-time guest that is going to be just as good as Benjamin Solak. So make sure you go check that out. Download, subscribe. We appreciate you all. We'll see you guys. Enjoy your Memorial Day. Peace out.